haven't been back here. It's March of 1999. I couldn't come up here. I couldn't come up here. It was too much of a haunting memory for me. I spent 18 years with undiagnosed depression, constant panic and anxiety. Why? Because of the stigma, myth, shame, and silence. Because I was afraid to get help. I was embarrassed. Society taught us that only weak people were depressed. Just buck up.
The only thing that's really clear in my memory is I showed up for work one day and it felt eerie in the office because my dad was always the first one there. So I called him and he didn't answer his phone. And so I drove down to his condo and I saw his car out front. And I used my key to open the door. And I found him in the kitchen. He had shot himself. Everything changed in my life. Everything changed. One of the two most important people in my life, poof, he was gone. The next 17 years, I needed so much help then. And I had no idea. The fact of the matter, and this has been studied with evidence-based studies published in peer-reviewed journals, is that 1 out of 5 of us on any given year are going to suffer from a mental illness. Panic, anxiety, depression. Every year in America, 1 out of 5 of us will experience what a behavioral health clinician would diagnose in a medical record as a mental illness. The brutal truth is that this is happening in your organization today, in all of our organizations today.
How do you fight a stigma? You educate people. You explain, you tell people and share our stories.
Mental health, it's just like physical health. If you injure your ankle and you don't take care of it, you end up hurting your knee, then you end up hurting your hip, then you end up hurting your other hip. Mental health is the same thing. Finding my father's suicide was just like breaking my ankle, but I didn't get the help that I needed, so it got worse. It got a lot worse. I found my dad's suicide. I had just found my mom after she had passed. I knew how unhappy my life was. I knew mental illness was prevalent in my family, but the stigma, the shame, it prevented me from even admitting to myself that I needed any help. Thankfully, David Lake, that colleague at work, he saw the signs that I was struggling and he knew what to do, but mostly he had the compassion to do something about it. He had the courage, he had the love. He cleared his calendar. He called me into his office for a meeting about a phony project. He called me into his office for one reason, as a nice way to approach me, to encourage me to go get some help, professional help. Those 5 minutes were a turning point in my life. Those 5 minutes were perhaps the most gracious gift I've ever been given. Mental health first aid is easy to provide, and it can be life-altering when you provide it.
What I want leaders to do, and we can change the world when we do this. If just every leader next year would say, I'm going to train my employees in mental health first aid this year. Game over. Now, 7 years later, I'm the happiest I have ever been. There is hope. I share my story with you all, because as I share my story with you, we all have our stories. And that's how we break down the stigmas, is by sharing the stories with each other.
What would you do if 20% of your teammates on any given year were suffering from cancer? Would you take a class? Would you spend a day educating yourself? Would you spend 5 minutes of your time trying to help somebody? What kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be?